Welcome to The Explainer. We're going to skip the usual intro today because we need to jump straight into a story from 1995 that is just, well, it's absolutely mind-blowing. It's a completely true story that perfectly captures a really bizarre quirk of human nature. And it all kicks off with a bank robbery right in broad daylight.
I want you to seriously ask yourself for a second, how does a fully grown man actually convince himself that rubbing lemon juice, yes, literal lemon juice, all over his face is going to make him completely invisible to security cameras? It honestly sounds like a bad joke, right? But this was a real event, and the psychology behind why he thought this would work is absolutely fascinating.
So here's what happened. On April 19th, 1995, a guy named MacArthur Wheeler decided he was going to rob a bank in Pittsburgh. But he didn't wear a ski mask, he didn't put pantyhoses over his head. No, his face was just heavily glazed with lemon juice. His logic was spectacularly flawed, but in his own head it made perfect sense. He knew that lemon juice can be used as invisible ink on paper, so he just reasoned that putting it on his skin would magically conceal his face from the bank's surveillance cameras.
Of course, the police literally just broadcasted the security footage on the local 11 o'clock news, and Wheeler was arrested just after midnight. When the cops showed up at his door, he was in absolute shock. He stood there, completely incredulous, and told the officers, "But I wore the juice!" This wasn't a case of insanity, you guys. It was a case of profound, unbelievable overconfidence born from a total and complete lack of knowledge.
Okay, let's dive into this. Because when psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger heard about Mr. Wheeler's baffling logic, they didn't just laugh it off. They actually saw it as an extreme example of a cognitive blind spot that every single one of us shares. They decided to formally investigate why people with incredibly low ability at a task tend to, weirdly enough, overestimate themselves so highly.
What they discovered is now pretty famous. The crucial thing here is making sure we understand exactly what this is. The Dunning-Kruger Effect is a cognitive bias where people with low ability in a specific area give overly positive assessments of their own skill. Now, a lot of people in pop culture get this wrong. They think it just means stupid people are overconfident. But that is absolutely not what the research says. It does not apply to your general intelligence. It applies to specific skills. You could literally be a brilliant brain surgeon, but still suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect when you're trying to fix a leaky pipe under your sink.
To prove this, Dunning and Kruger put together a landmark study back in 1999. They brought in a bunch of undergrad students and tested their actual objective abilities across 3 very specific domains: logical reasoning, English grammar, and their appreciation of humor. After taking the tests, but right before they were allowed to see their actual scores, the participants were asked to basically guess their own performance compared to everyone else.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what they found. The participants who scored in the bottom quartile, so the absolutely lowest performing group, their actual test scores put them way down in the 12th percentile. But when they were asked to rank themselves, they firmly believed, without a doubt, that they were sitting pretty in the 62nd percentile. The gap between how bad they actually were and how great they thought they were was just massive.
So why does this happen? Well, the original psychological explanation revolves around a super interesting concept called metacognition. Metacognition is basically just your awareness and understanding of your own thought processes. It's thinking about thinking. It's the exact psychological mechanism that lets you step back, look at your own work, and accurately judge, hey, is this actually good or is it terrible?
Dunning and Kruger argued that poor performers are actually dealing with a double burden of incompetence. It's a double whammy. First, they lack the specific skill or knowledge they need to actually produce the right answer. But second, and this is the kicker, because they don't have that knowledge, they also lack the metacognitive ability to even recognize what a right answer looks like. If you literally don't know the rules of grammar, you don't have the mental tools to recognize that your own grammar is awful. Now, it is totally worth noting that within the scientific community, there's actually a pretty vigorous ongoing debate about what the root cause of this really is. The metacognitive model says we literally cannot judge our own flaws. But other researchers argue it's mostly just a statistical artifact. They point to a math phenomenon called regression to the mean, mixed with our general innate psychological bias to just assume we're all better than average. Both sides have really compelling data, but here's the thing. Regardless of whether it's a math quirk or a psychological blind spot, the real-world outcome is exactly the same. The unskilled heavily overrate themselves.
Now, what's really interesting about this is a brilliant quote from David Dunning himself. He says, "The first rule of the Dunning-Kruger Club is you don't know you're a member of the Dunning-Kruger Club. This cognitive blind spot is entirely invisible to the person experiencing it. When you're stuck in it, your incompetence doesn't make you feel confused or cautious. No, it actually blesses you with an inappropriate, booming confidence that feels exactly like real knowledge.
And we see this extending way, way beyond simple lab tests on grammar and logic. It completely permeates our daily lives, our social media feeds, and our workplaces. Because we all have pockets of incompetence, it means every single one of us is susceptible to stumbling right into this effect without even realizing it.
Just think about this number for a second. 93%. Studies actually show that 93% of American drivers genuinely believe they are better than average drivers. Statistically, that is literally impossible. Yet the vast majority of us are cruising around out there totally convinced of our own superior skill behind the wheel.
Now, while overestimating your driving skills might just lead to a minor fender bender, the real-world risks outlined in the research are so much higher. We're talking high stakes. It happens in aviation, where overconfidence can actually lead pilots to operate aircraft without adequate training. It happens in emergency medicine, where trainees might miss out on proper supervision because they falsely project total competence. It happens in the workplace, where over 40% of employees often think they're in the top 5% of performers, which completely skews team dynamics. And it even happens in the economy, where overconfident buyers frequently overpay in markets, totally missing the risks because they think they already know everything about a product.
Interestingly enough, research suggests that culture plays a massive role in how we assess ourselves. Western cultures, like right here in America, tend to highly overestimate their abilities. But in Japan, studies show the exact opposite trend. And it's fascinating. People there often underestimate their abilities. They actually use this as a deliberate strategy. They view their own underachievement as an opportunity to study harder and improve. It's a completely different way of framing self-worth and learning.
So how do we actually overcome an invisible bias? If the first rule is that we don't even know we're in the club, what's our way out? Well, according to the data, the answer lies in actively cultivating intellectual humility. This is the practice of knowing your limits, tolerating people who disagree with you, and accepting that no matter how incredibly smart you might be, you are intellectually fallible.
Let's move on and see how this builds across the typical journey of learning. When you first start learning something brand new, you have very low knowledge but incredibly high confidence. You learn a tiny little bit and boom, you think you know it all. But if you keep studying, you hit step 2. You realize how insanely complex the topic actually is and your confidence just plummets. This is where most people give up. But if you can push through to step 3, engaging in continuous study, you slowly regain a cautious, expert confidence that's based on actual reality, not just an illusion.
A major key to surviving that steep dip in confidence is shifting how you view intelligence itself. If you have what's called a fixed trait mindset, meaning you believe intelligence is totally static, you either have it or you don't, it is psychologically terrifying to admit when you're wrong. But if you adopt a growth mindset, believing intelligence develops through effort over time, it creates this psychologically safe space to just admit your ignorance. Being wrong isn't some permanent flaw anymore, it's literally just the next step in getting smarter.
And guys, the societal benefits of this intellectual humility are just immense. The research shows that people who are intellectually humble actually possess far more accurate general knowledge. They're way better at discriminating between fact and fiction. Furthermore, they view people who disagree with them more favorably, they are open to compromising, and they willingly explore information that directly conflicts with their current beliefs. In an increasingly polarized world, actively seeking out the opinions of others, especially when we don't like them, is how we truly expand our own intelligence.
Ultimately, the Dunning-Kruger effect is a sliding scale that's going to follow us our entire lives. As long as we keep taking on new challenges, we are going to experience pockets of incompetence. And the only real way to combat it is to lean hard into the discomfort of the unknown. Over 2,000 years ago, Socrates perfectly summarized this whole thing when he said, "I know that I am intelligent because I know that I know nothing." So I'll leave you with this. What is one area in your own life right now where you might just be wearing the lemon juice?